and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Renny.
Hi, I'm Jesi.
And I'm Josh. And today, I want to thank Professor Hartman for making a return to our panel.
Okay, I'm very pleased.
Renny, it's always great to have you here, and we look forward to the many discussions we plan to have you on board for.
Okay, we have a few coming up next month.
And Larry and Jesi, as always. And today we're going to be going over a play that Larry suggested, and that is Faust, this version by Johann von Goethe. And Larry, you have a discussion starter?
Yes, but before I give that, I just want to apologize to you guys if you didn't like it, because it was long.
It is long.
And I didn't know it was that long when I went into it.
Yes, they say they perform it, but rarely.
Yeah, but they also say it has the largest audience
in Germany.
Yeah.
Ever.
I was gonna say, I think I actually read this, or at least excerpts of it, in school way back when. So when you suggested it, I was like, oh, I know this. I've heard of this before, and I remember, as I was reading through it, some of the things that we touched on in class and the different kind of themes that they had going through it.
I hadn't read it. I read The Sorrows of Young Goethe, but I didn't read Faust in college.
Oh, wow.
I read the Merlot version. Back in
I think I might have read that one and gotten it confused with this one, and I apologize. But hopefully we can get something out of the discussion, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it.
Yes. The way that they approach it, though, too, is somewhat different. It seems like Goethe does more to the story. I've noticed the Marlowe one was shorter.
Well, I know that certainly the characters are much more fleshed out because he has all that time. The devil, Mephistopheles, isn't even introduced till scene 4. You're well into part 1 before he even appears, which I thought was interesting because I thought he was there right in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, he was in the prologue, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, talking to God
right.
and making the plan.
And that was an interesting conversation because God lets him go about his business because he knows that he has control over Aristophanes. Next week we're going over an Aristophanes play. So Aristophanes.
There's a lot of
Greek sounding names.
I'm not even.
He knows that he can sweep the floor with Aristophanes. So
Mephistopheles.
Mephistopheles.
That one.
Yes.
There's a Mephistopheles waltz by Mozart, and actually, this is way off topic, a Mephistopheles waltz movie with Alan Alda from the 60s, which is very rare and is a really terrific horror movie.
Alan Alda's a magnificent actor.
That was way before MASH in the 70s.
So, I just to get the discussion started, what I'd like to say is, there's a lot to talk about. It's huge, and there's a lot going on, not only in Germany at the time, but across the world. It's a revolutionary time. Yes. I think this could be classified as a revolutionary work. What do you think about the salvation of Faust at the end? I mean, I think that Goethe got one thing right. I'm sorry, Goethe. Yeah, I think that what he got right was that God won't lose a bet to the devil, but I'm not sure about much else in there.
Okay, I also think it's kind of like the Greek plays at the end where they sort of sometimes didn't know where to end, so they send in a god to fly everybody off the stage, the Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
And I think that the salvation is a little bit like that. He has to end it somewhere, and he has to give Faustus something out of all of this, and so he gets his salvation.
Which is strange, too, because it's called a tragedy.
Yeah, I think that he's labeled as like a tragic hero of the story, which
I
have a hard time calling him a hero.
Yeah, that's how I kind of feel about it.
A tragic hero is not the same thing,
I guess it's fair.
Medea is a tragic heroine, but she kills her sons.
Who is human tragedy per se.
Oh.
Yeah,
because it pretty much explores how flawed we are as individuals. The fact that Faust has that ability to bear the control that in the exchange that he sells himself to the devil.
Okay, so we open up, right, in heaven.
Yes.
And you have God there with talking to Mephistopheles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he makes this bet that, and he also says that Faust is his most favorite, which is strange to me, in that Faust is not faithful to the church or to religion at all. He's rewriting the Bible at that time, and he's changing words in it. He's changing logos to deed or act. And he's also questioning whether or not he's a god at this time. And he says, am I a god, right? He's questioning that. And then the first thing he does is start rewriting the Bible. And he's saying that God, most important feature of what God does is his will. And comparing himself to a god, I think that's when he decides that he's just going to follow his will, his own will, to wherever it leads him. And without the assistance or asking of God and giving into that pride, trying to be more than you are, it just leads to travesty after travesty after travesty.
He also seems like the kind of person that wants to be, he wants to bear everything that life has to offer as far as knowledge is concerned. It says right in the part 1, Night, he said, I've studied now to my regret philosophy, law, medicine, and what is worst, theology, from end to end with diligence. Yet here I am, a wretched fool, and still no wiser than before. He's the kind of person that wants to bear, he wants to possess as much as one can possibly know as far as knowledge and, in that case, power over his dominion is concerned.
But he's also, unfortunately, easily bored with what he takes up.
He's not satisfied. He's got no sense of gratitude or satisfaction.
He doesn't get satisfied. And in a way, he's analogous to Job, because Job was favored of God, and then...
But he was actually righteous.
Yes, he was. But then he's subject to all these terrible things, but he doesn't give up his faith. Whereas really, Faustus doesn't have a faith that we know of.
No. And never repents, never does anything Christian.
No.
In the when it comes
even
to
though we have
alchemy,
angels and
more
cupids
so.
and everything that appear.
Yeah, like, and I read also, or I heard on a recording that between the first part and the second part, he took a trip to Greece.
Yes, and Rome. He became
well,
very
he went
influenced.
to Italy. Yeah,
Rome.
There's a great deal of separation though between the two, because the second one was more written at the very end of his life.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep,
yeah,
that's true too.
And it reflects
kind
the
of
end
time
of his
jump
life.
that I
the first part is published, you can see, 1803 or 1805, and the last is after he died, 1832, although he finished it before that, it wasn't published.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were a big, and he himself was probably what you would call a classicist. Well, we said before, like the American Revolution was written by classicists, but it's very romantic because it emphasizes the individual. The individual doesn't need a king. The individual can vote and determine his or her own political life. So the same thing with I'm much more familiar with the Goethe, but who writes in the first person, the same thing. This is the way I feel. I don't know why I feel this way, but now I feel something different. And Faust is a little bit the same way. No matter what I explore or what I do, then I have bad feelings about it. I have to do something else. I have to go on.
Yes.
I'm missing something. I'm missing something.
Well, I mean, at first, right, he's a materialist, right? He's like influenced probably by the English philosophers of the time. Being a German himself, he kind of comes around to an idealism in the second part, but it's just a mess.
Anybody that's looking to that wants it all as far as material is concerned is never going to be satisfied. And the question at hand
is where do you get satisfaction?
It's where you get satisfaction, and how do you define complete materialism? It's the same thing as how do you define absolute knowledge?
Right. Well, it's
because
question,
and also it's very theological
that.
Because what is it to be a god or not to be a god? Which is it, and how is that expressed? Is that just the will?
And who's the judge too?
Well, I would say no, because things went very badly for Goethe and everybody around him.
Well, him, but that's not.
I mean, not Goethe. I'm sorry, Faust.
I was going to say, it almost seemed like every single person he interfered with, it was just like the consequence. Like they suffered the consequences of what he did
his will.
To them.
Yeah, his will. Yeah. They suffered the consequences of his will. And I find it interesting at the end that guilt cannot make it through his door, but care can. And then he looks at care as an obstacle. He says, I shouldn't care. Care's keeping me from following my will.
Yes, well, it would.
That's why it's a virtue, and not something to throw away
Sure.
just before you die and go to heaven.
If you empathize with other people, then you wouldn't harm them. But so there, yes, you can't care. You have to. They only care about themselves
And their will.
and their will.
Yeah.
We have something of that modernly. I looked this up just before I left the house. It's kind of left field, but going back to rock, a lot of rock people have claimed that they made a pact with the devil, and I'm going to use Led Zeppelin because Jimmy Page even bought
Aleister
Crowley's house. And
Do you think this work influenced Crowley at all?
I don't know. No, Crowley was dead by then.
I thought Crowley was
you would think
more
Crowley
modern.
he was in the 1920s. He was
Yeah.
earlier. But he said the same thing. Do what you will. Doesn't matter what other people are like.
It's the whole of the law.
Do your own thing, although he didn't say do your own thing. Yes.
But that was implicit with him.
So Faust is exploring that
Yeah.
kind of situation. Yes, how does it work? It doesn't usually work very well. That's why we try to take care of one another.
Absolutely.
I think it's the whole play was just kind of interesting how it showed, because we, as you were saying, we have so many people who, do what you will, and this was kind of showing, the good and evils of doing your will, but a more noticeable way, because all of our actions have consequences.
That's right.
And other people unfortunately will suffer some of the consequences of our actions, not necessarily with us knowing. So I think this was like a great piece to kind of show almost immediately the consequences of his different actions.
And
Yeah, there's no time wasted.
Yeah.
People die fast.
Yes.
and this one really gives you that magnified look to it too, because in our own lives we have no idea. There are greater groups of people, you can see a greater impact on what they have on the general public or among certain sects of people, but that one's a bit more evident than what you see here.
Yeah, well, what you see here is a man who is motivated by his own will
Yes.
to the consequence of everything else. Let everything else be damned, really. And then at the end, the angels come down and say, "Yeah, that's right. Come to heaven." Bizarre.
I would say that it was hard, I think, to get out of it, and so that's kind of artificial.
I don't think so. I
artificial
think that he himself
and you
was
think
similar.
The author himself.
I think he himself was probably similar. I mean, I don't.
Well, he had an unusual and very varied life and lived long. He lived till 80 for the time.
Yeah,
period, and was productive the entire time also. Like the romantic poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge, usually the romantic materialist for a young person, but he continued to write in this way all through his life, which was really also interesting.
Yeah, because I think he's living it too to some extent. Like, I mean, I don't know what he went to in Greece or Italy or wherever he went.
Well, he was very influenced by classicism then, but he still wrote romantically.
Well, yeah, trying to bring.
Lyrically, he's a lyric writer.
Well, what do you mean by romantically?
The emphasis on the self and individual emotions and how you do affect everything. That's if you go back to the classicists, everything's in the third person or the omniscient. It's the all. It's not just the one.
And then the Victorians seem to pretty much bring about the flaws of the self and its
Oh yes, but we certainly live
our
in
impact.
exactly that kind of period today, right? This
Yes.
instant. Yes.
Yeah,
It's
because
very vivid.
you're serving yourself or you're serving God. I mean, that's it. And if you're serving yourself, then you got the devil there on your shoulder, helping you destroy as many lives as possible. On your way down.
Such a dark
It
way to
depends
put
on how
it.
you. Larry's always been anti self-divinity.
Like, I mean, this idea of apotheosis, right? Like, it's a Gnostic idea. Knowledge, right? Like you were saying earlier, this world contains, there are secrets in it. And if you unravel those secrets, then you'll be able to reach godhood.
Be a god yourself.
Right.
What they say with time comes wisdom. If you're following, the voice of God and just doing what God tells you to do, how are you ever going to gain that wisdom as opposed to
But
just doing
Faust
what you're told?
doesn't gain wisdom either.
Because that is wisdom.
Yes.
It is wise to
Yes.
follow God because
Yes.
you are just a
Well,
limited person.
I don't know if Faust should follow God, but he can't concentrate or follow any line or activity long enough for some kind of wisdom to override his knowledge. He just goes from one topic to the other to see which one will satisfy him the most, and it turns out, of course, that none of them do. So he doesn't attain wisdom, but I don't think he thinks he's trying to attain wisdom. He thinks he's trying to attain all knowledge.
This whole play just kind of reminded me, I don't know, I assume everybody's heard of the quote, but almost as soon as I met Faust, I immediately thought of the more you learn, the less you know.
One of my favorite books that I've read is a work from another Swiss writer, Robert Walser, in Jacob von Goethe. And it's dry and, in a way, absurd, but it gives you that idea that God stands with the thoughtless. There are things that are just not meant to be explained.
We don't know what purpose everything is, or has, or doesn't have. Sometimes we can see by hindsight something actually literally, but many times there's all kinds of things in life, let alone Faust, that we can't really explain. We're not going to get an answer to. And we're going to hope the angels come down and take us.
At the end of the day, though, religion itself is a human-made invention.
And that's one of Faust's problems also, is that his extreme materialism keeps him also from faith. It accepts evil. It certainly accepts the physical manifestation of the devil. And spirits, he calls up spirits, although sometimes he can't see them exactly.
Right.
But he believes in all of that kind of mysticism.
Well, I mean, it's kind of in a way saying that if you go after this knowledge, then, you're basically going down this path of essentially evil and causing chaos all around you, which makes sense for the time period if that's what the message that he's trying to kind of portray. But when you look at the end and how he wrote it, it almost seems like God isn't punishing him for searching for the knowledge in his will.
He finished the second part, though, towards the very end of his life, dying at 80. And I'm sure that maybe personally Goethe was thinking to himself, what lies for me on the other side?
Yeah, exactly. You have to think that.
So, that has to apply to Faust also.
I kind of took it a little differently. I took it as why can't science and religion live together?
But he's not satisfied with it. That's the
because
problem.
It can't satisfy.
That's the problem. Yes, that's the problem with the emphasis on the self, and that everything comes from within us or from our will. It isn't satisfying, and that's why we have other philosophies and ideas. I'm glad you picked it because I haven't read Faust, and it is considered his Shakespearean masterpiece.
It's considered.
See, I think it's just shocking. I think that's what made it so notoriable. And I think that the people in the Illuminati,
the first part made him famous. The early part.
Yeah, I'm sure it did, and I'm sure he made some very interesting friends.
The Sorrows of Young Werther made everybody commit suicide. So that wasn't terrific. Exactly.
No, in fact, I recently heard a pop culture. I forget who it was, but it was either pop culture, literary culture. I think it was a comic book creator. No, I don't remember. Anyway, the idea was that when you're creating art, if it's true art, then when you're done reading it, if somebody's suicidal is done reading it, then they want to go on living.
Fortunately, suicide and death are huge parts of romanticism.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, there were a lot of romantics.
That's because you can't get satisfaction from yourself.
So that is a problem.
I like the Renny and I were talking before that people that think too much drive themselves into deeper despair.
Into a hole sometimes.
Yeah, like Keats.
That's where, in just modern culture, therapists are doing so well because, people are in their mind so much. That's, depression, anxiety, and people have to go kind of talk it out so that way they're not in their head so much. And
okay, my final thought is that I had not read the piece before, although I have known that it existed and is considered a German masterpiece and very influential in Western literature and culture in general, especially for the Germans. But I did find that It was sometimes difficult to read. It is very long, and there seems to be different avenues it takes at times and then doesn't quite sometimes come back to them, like the ending where suddenly a man who has devoted himself to his own will gets his salvation in the end. But I would certainly advise people to read the piece, and I think I would see it if it was ever presented.
It would be very interesting to see how it is presented,
Mm-hmm.
especially as faithful to this particular version, the Goethe version, as possible.
I would need probably about 10 intermissions.
At least.
You know, I read this for the first time over the past few days, and I got a version on audio that I found on YouTube, and I had a version in print, and it said it's 4 hours long. This is great. And I realized, oh, it's part one. It was a couple of days after.
It's only part one, yes.
Wow, yes, it's very long. It's very meandering. I would use the word confused.
And for a play, it's very long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for a play.
Well,
It's very
because
long.
he wanted to go through he wanted to go through philosophy, religion, he wanted to go through all those areas, so much of it is very theological.
I think he covers all the points that he tries to make,
Well,
or at least I felt that he did, because even before, as we were talking about depression, he's not satisfied because he's unhappy with, everything that's coming his way. So I think he hits a lot of, points that we don't have to, that we can take through with us. Like, it's not something that's strictly that time period. You can see it into the modern era.
Oh yes, that's why
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a
it's very relevant today. Very relevant today. But it's I would take it as a warning, and I would say the ending is not real. Don't trust that ending because it's not real. One of the things that they used to do is use theater to prepare the masses, right? This was what Plato believed in, to prepare the masses for social change. And I think that plays out exactly in the one scene. This is just the last thing I wanted to mention because I think it's interesting. The one scene where Faust shows up right at the castle just before they changed the money supply for the Holy Roman Emperor, where they, instead of having to have actual coinage, you switched to paper and then just said, don't worry about the coinage. If somebody asks for a return on the note, then you worry about the coinage. And that's how they convinced them.
Read it and make your own decision.
What would we rate it? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted. Larry?
I'm going to go with a 2.5. It takes a lot off of the ending and the meandering, and I don't think it needs to be this long. I think we could have cut a lot off of this. So that's where I'm going, 2.5.
I'll give it a 4.5 because it is considered a masterpiece and in many places required reading. And I'm sorry that I didn't read it before.
I think I'm going for about maybe with a 3. I want to go right in between you guys because I feel like it has a lot of, excellent points and themes throughout. I personally enjoyed it. I think it was, well put together, even though you felt it was like meandering a little bit. You weren't a fan of the ending. I don't know. I overall liked it. I remembered reading a little bit, like an excerpt of it in high school. So, it just kind of, I remember it differently. So reading it now, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I think it has a different kind of feel to it.
All
when
that
you're an
stuff in
adult,
Greece is a little much. It's just a little much with all the griffins and the it just
It's a
keeps
lot,
going.
but I don't know. Overall, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I think it's the greatest thing ever written, but I also don't think it's bad. So I enjoyed it. I'd say 3.
I give it a 3.5. I think the first part. I think the first part was stronger because it seemed to really harp on that idea that Faust was making this deal in order to pursue his quest for self-divinity, but by the second part, it became a different kind of work. It became more reflective of Goethe himself. I think that as far as the character development was concerned, it was somewhat clever, and I think that the devil. I'm just going to say the devil.
Yeah, he's happy to call himself that.
He was an interesting guide per se, and I just felt that
The devil is always more interesting. Lucifer is more interesting in Paradise Lost than Adam is.
I mean, that's pretty much. I mean, he's not interesting in Dante's Inferno or the Divine Comedy because he's just frozen from
cut out
below the.
Yeah.
He's frozen from below the shoulders in ice. If you're interested in checking out Faust 1 and 2, here is my copy by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And I want to thank everybody for tuning into this discussion on Literary Gladiators. Be sure to join us next time, and for now, keep reading. Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and on the next episode, Larry, Jesi, Renny, and I will be discussing The Birds by Aristophanes. If you like what you see on our channel, be sure to support us on our Patreon, because that will allow us to build up the funds that we need in order to come with you with even more great material. Be sure to join us next time, and keep reading.